And welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us once again. We are back and better than ever anyway. Here at the Upside, we've had quite a few things going on, but we are back and ready for the stretch run as we get ready for the MLB trade deadline. We're going to check in around the league, see what's going on, check in on the standings, who's buying, who's selling, who could be available at the deadline. We'll check in on a lot of the injuries that have happened across Major League Baseball as well. We'll get into some live baseball games as well. We'll also go back to what we did this offseason, where we had a lot of fun discussing where players might end up signing, where they might get traded to in the offseason, with our return of our MLB Hot Stove Daily Show. That will take place 5 days a week, and on special circumstances, when there's a big trade on the weekend, we will have it for you as well. So be sure to hit that like and subscribe. We're going to be with you guys throughout the entire month of July as we gear up for the trade deadline. First and foremost, I want to thank all of you guys who are back. Sarah, once again, appreciate you joining us once again. It's been a long time since we've done this type of thing regularly. We're going to get back into that. We've had a lot of things keep us away from doing what we've really come to enjoy with you guys, and that's celebrating all kinds of different sports and just being able to relax, not have to worry about you know work or any other issues that might be going on in everybody's lives, and just come here and just enjoy some good sports talk with you guys. So if you guys have been here before, welcome back. If you guys are new here, make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. I got a couple of new graphics that we've been creating for you guys as well, and going to try some different formats of things over the next couple of months. So make sure you guys are with us as well. Sarah, interested to see where the Cardinals and Yankees, what they end up doing. Love those teams. Well, I know you're a huge Cardinal fan. I wasn't sure if you were a Yankee fan or not, but I know you love your Cardinals. Lance Lynn seems to have straightened himself out over his last, 5 starts at home anyway, but his previous 4, he was a little rocky, and seems to at least be getting himself on the right trend there. We'll check in on the Cardinals for you, Sarah. And I do enjoy doing this with you guys. It's been a hectic year. I told you guys over the last couple of days the videos that we're going to be doing for you guys. And we're going to kind of go into what's going on with us here at the Upside and, kind of go forward from there. But like I said, if you haven't hit that like and subscribe already, please do so. And let me get this page set for you guys. And without further ado, here we go. Alrighty, so we'll start here with the standings. Where do we stand here at the halfway mark in the season? Well, the AL East looks absolutely fantastic right now with those top 2 teams. The Baltimore Orioles out ahead of things right there, 22 games above 500. The Yankees are also 22 games above 500. They are tied atop the AL East. Yankees, having played a couple of games more, are the reason why they're in second. Red Sox playing a little bit above their heads, seem to be doing what they did last year, also playing above 500 ball. The Tampa Bay Rays having a little bit of a downturn this year, not just due to the players that are missing. Shane McClanahan out for the year, of course, Wander Franco having his legal issues, but also due to some very poor performances on the field, most notably Randy Arozarena. Then you go to the bottom of this division, and the Toronto Blue Jays could very well be a seller at this year's deadline. They are currently 8 games under 500, 15 games back in the division. They are not catching the Orioles. They are not catching the Yankees for the division crown. They could still catch fire and I suppose claim one of those wild card spots. They absolutely could do that, but I'm not counting on it if I'm a Blue Jays fan. I would look at this team and say, hey, this was the year, make or break. They had to get some things done. They had to make the push, and their players are getting older. They are losing their value. Guerrero's in the final year of his deal. Bo Bichette's a couple years away from free agency. He's having a down year. You were hoping, if you were going to go bad this year, that Bo Bichette would have incredible trade value, and he hasn't really helped that out this year with having a poor performance. So they're a team to watch as a seller here at the deadline. There's not going to be too many sellers that you're going to see when you look at these standings, just because of how the wild card picture looks and how some of these divisions are really shaking out. So that's kind of where things stand at the AL East. AL Central, Guardians. Who would have thought they're 22 games above 500? Stephen Vogt absolutely deserves Manager of the Year honors at the halfway mark right now. Do I think they'll ultimately hold on to things in the AL Central? Honestly, I don't. I don't think they're going to go out there and make the moves necessary to keep the pace anyway in the AL Central. Do I think they have a chance to wild card spot? Absolutely. for the Twins and Royals, both playing way above what they thought, or what we all thought they were going to do coming into the year. We knew the Twins were going to have a step back year, but this was a very weak division. It looked very winnable for them, even with the losses that they took from a roster construction standpoint. You lose a guy like Sonny Gray, you lose a guy like Kenta Maeda. You're trying to shave off as much payroll as you possibly can, and ultimately your fan base realizes what you're doing. They realize they're not going to be very competitive. Honestly, in the first month of the year, would have been said that this was the most lackluster team in Major League Baseball this year. Well, they've certainly straightened things out, and nice work by Baldelli, I think, is the manager there. He did a great job getting this team back on the right trajectory. They still have had some up and down performances in that rotation, as can be expected with the number of innings that they lost out of that rotation. But what a job. And Carlos Correa is finally back to being the Carlos Correa that we saw with the Houston Astros. That's probably the biggest change offensively for them, is the return of a productive Carlos Correa. Last year hit around 237, 238. This year hitting around 310, his second best mark of his entire career, only second to the 2017 where they, I believe they won the championship that year with the Astros. Looking at the Kansas City Royals, we knew they were going to be better. They certainly were the second biggest investor in free agency this offseason. None of us saw that coming. We knew that they were going to be better after they made those moves. I don't think anybody saw them 8 games above 500, 7 games back of the division right now, leading the division leading Guardians right now. But looking at the Royals, they're really doing it with the pieces that they brought in and an MVP candidate in Bobby Witt Jr. He absolutely has arrived this year. All that momentum, everything that we were looking at for Bo Bichette really has gone to Bobby Witt this year. He has been that impactful to winning games for the Kansas City Royals. Now, are they a World Series contender? Absolutely not. They still are a far cry away from that. But this has certainly been an impressive year for them. Could they snake one of those final wildcard spots? Absolutely. So keep your eyes peeled there. Bottom dwellers in this division, the Tigers. Everybody thought they'd be a little bit better, and they are. But you still have an albatross on that roster in Javi Baez. And you're kind of mixing and matching young talent with older, underperforming players. And it's just not a recipe for success. You hear all the time, they talk about on MLB Network anyway, about not being in the middle, going ahead and putting all your chips into the middle and saying you're going to contend, or taking them all out and going through a rebuild. Being one of those teams in the middle is not the way you want to go, and that's where the Tigers find themselves. Honestly, it's kind of understandable why they find themselves there. They committed a lot of money to Javi Baez. It didn't work out, obviously. They still got a number of years left on that deal. I would not be surprised if Tarek Skubal, though, wins the American League Cy Young. He has been that good this year for them. If they could just get a little bit better across the board, we're talking about a team that might contend for a wild card spot this year. But honestly, this is a team that needs to capitalize on the resources that they have and spin them off at the deadline and really try to tank for one of the best draft picks they can. The White Sox absolutely were going to be a rebuilding team this year. They made that announcement very clear. They traded away pretty much everybody off their roster that they could at this point, and they could still trade more pieces. Luis Robert, one of those pieces. Garrett Crochet seems to have his name bandied about quite a bit right now. They have a number of pieces that other teams could use at the deadline. So keep your eyes peeled for what the White Sox ultimately do. They are one of the teams that has already declared themselves a seller at this year's deadline. Out to the AL West, the most disappointing division in the entire American League. Seattle Mariners are out to a 3-game advantage anyway over the Houston Astros. They're 3-7 though over their last 10 games. They've really struggled and allowed the Rangers, who had a 6-game losing streak, to really hang around there and be in the playoff picture. You look at the Angels; they only find themselves 9.5 games out here. This is a very underperforming division. We posted a video about this about a month ago, right before our most recent hiatus. We'll get into that again later on. But for the Mariners, you look at what this team really needs. They need a little bit more offense. That pitching staff has been absolutely fantastic for them, but they just need more productive at-bats, whether that be moving a runner over, having productive outs, or just hitting the ball over the fence. Mariners certainly tried to invest a little bit more than they have in recent years by bringing in Mitch Garver anyway, but there's still more work to do. You look at the Houston Astros; they are no longer the behemoth in this division. Rangers, reigning World Series champions, certainly were expected to be around 500 going into the All-Star break. They are right now about 8 games under, And you'd have to look at this Rangers team and say, hey, we knew they were going to be not great to start the year with the amount of injuries that they had coming into the year. They got even worse as the year progressed. Those injuries really kind of sidetracked them, especially this underperforming offense. That's why they find themselves 8 games back. They do get back Scherzer. It looks like they're going to have DeGrom back and Maley back at some point soon, probably in the next month or so. Josh Young may be shut down for the year. He may be back soon. He's seeing a specialist to get a third opinion on his injury. And right now, I mean, you look at how they performed on Sunday Night Baseball, they look like the World Series champs. You see the 6 previous games before that, they look like they can't fight their way out of a wet paper bag. And that's just what it's been for the Rangers this year. For the Houston Astros, they had a lot of similar injury issues coming into the year with their starting staff. A lot of guys that are on pending or 1-year deals that are going to be expiring after this year. They have some issues that they're going to have to figure out with Tucker and Alvarez and Bregman. All those guys. Who do they bring back? Has Verlander got another year in him? You know, is this the last year we really see the Astros contend? Do they ship, if they're not contending at the All-Star break, do they go ahead and push their chips to the center and say, the heck with it, we're going to trade everybody? Right now, they're 3 games back in the division. They've been really good over the last 10 games, 9 of 10. They've won 9 of 10 anyway, and it looks like the Astros might finally have gotten their footing after stumbling out of the gates. Astros at one point, I believe, were around 10 games back in this division. Right now, they find themselves 3 back. And if I'm the Mariners, I look at that Astros team and I say, uh-oh, we're in trouble. Now, for the Rangers, we talked a little bit about their injury issues, but it's not been the injuries that have been the biggest problem for this team. Surprisingly, their pitching has held up. Michael Lorenzen has been great. Bradford in the first month before he got hurt was great. John Gray for the first couple of months was great. Got rocked in his last couple of starts. Dane Dunning was great in the beginning. He got rocked in his last couple of starts and has since been shifted to the bullpen. They've had to put more players on, they've had to designate more players that other teams would normally have on their roster because of how many players are due to come back from their injured list. They just made a trade, Yuri Rodriguez. They made another trade with Tinoco. There's so many players they've had to jettison off this roster already, and they still are expecting to get DeGrom, Young, Foscue, among others back at some point this year. So they're going to have to trade other pieces around the deadline. Do I think they'll be a seller? Rangers, the front office there, doesn't think they're a seller, at least at this time. They still think they're in it. They still think they're a contender, and you can't really argue with them. I mean, they're 8 games back. We've seen 10-game deficits overcome in 1 month. They've got 3 to be able to figure this out, and they're the reigning World Series champions, and you could argue, when healthy, this is the best starting staff in the entire major leagues. You're talking about Jacob DeGrom, probably the best starter in all of baseball when he is healthy. Max Scherzer looks back to being the Max Scherzer of old. You look back at the other pieces on this roster, Nathan Eovaldi has been great for them as well. Then they have a bevy of other starters. Andrew Heaney's been fantastic for this team this year through 7 great innings against the Baltimore Orioles on Sunday. He has gotten absolutely 0 run support, and that's the reason the Rangers find themselves in the spot that they're in right now. Leody Taveras was their center fielder coming into the year. He's been their starter there for the past couple of years. Former top prospect, just really hasn't lived up offensively this year and in previous years to what they had hoped he would be. And this year they finally have another replacement to kind of take some of those at-bats, and it's still early, but Derek Hill looks very good in center, had a big-time gaffe that cost him a game against the Milwaukee Brewers a week ago. But he's made some spectacular plays out there since, but he might actually be losing his job. Leody Taveras might be losing his job in center field for the Texas Rangers, and the Rangers, if they do fall out of contention, if this offense doesn't get back to where it needs to be, you're looking at a number of names that could get back some premium assets for the Rangers. Michael Lorenzen is on a cheap 1-year deal. He could easily fetch you a borderline top 100 guy based off of how well he is pitching this year. Nathan Eovaldi has a vesting option, I believe, for next year, or a player option, one of the two. He looks absolutely fantastic this year in stretches. Has had his injury issues, of course, as well, but playoff performer, you're looking at another guy who'd get you a fair price. Max Scherzer, now that he's healthy, and as long as he stays healthy going up to the deadline, he could be another guy that's on a cheaper deal since the Mets are paying so much of his contract that could also be dealt at the deadline. And you know if the Rangers are in sell mode, Scherzer ain't going to want to hang around. He will be moved. I do not think the Rangers will sell, though. Chris Young has been defiant about that, saying, hey, We're only 8 games back right now, essentially. We have 3 months left in the season. We chisel a couple of games off every single month. We win the division, and we're right back into a World Series run once again. You have Corey Seager, who's not having a great year. Marcus Semien is having a horrible stretch of all horrible stretches. I think he was 5 for 65 last time I looked. That's not Marcus Semien, and right now that's the only Ranger who might actually start in the All-Star game. I don't think it will happen, but that's just where things are for the Rangers. They just haven't gotten the production that they're expecting out of this lineup. Evan Carter hasn't been good. He currently is on the injured list. Wyatt Langford was expected to come in, knock the cover off the baseball, and really propel things. He struggled out of the gate, really struggled with power numbers. He has since, I believe, fixed some of the adjustments that he needed to make, and he looks every bit the prospect the Rangers were hoping when he first came up with the Rangers at the beginning of the year. The biggest difference in this lineup, aside from Semien and Seager, has got to be Adolis Garcia. My goodness, has this guy really struggled. He's turned it on a little bit as far as, making more solid contact, not swinging and missing quite as much, but he's still hitting around 215, 220, hitting for absolutely zero power. The big thing for the Rangers, they can't hit the fastball. And we just saw them struggle against that with the Milwaukee Brewers and the Baltimore Orioles. Throw fastball after fastball 65% of the time, and not one of the Rangers was able to turn one around. The only offensive piece the Rangers really have going for them this year has been Josh Smith anyway. He was expected to be the third shortstop coming into the year. Ezekiel Duran was supposed to be the number 2 shortstop behind Corey Seager. Seager missed some time due to injury, and so you thought, hey, you got Duran there, he could easily step in and really help you out. Well, Duran has since been demoted to AAA because he hasn't been able to hit the fastball either. Meanwhile, Josh Smith has been absolutely fantastic, hitting around 300. He's probably been one of the top 5 players in Major League Baseball, or in the American League so far this year from an offensive standpoint. You still look at Judge being the MVP, obviously. There's some other great performances, Gunnar Henderson as well, but Josh Smith has been that good for this really struggling Rangers offense. They can't hit with runners in scoring position. They can't get a bunt down to save their life. Jonah Heim's really struggled this year as well. We knew he had a career year last year as a catcher. All those innings, all those extra innings in the postseason really caught up to him, and it looks like he just needs a little bit of time to get to being the old Jonah Heim. He's shown some signs of coming out of it. We'll see if those trends hold. Some of the Rangers that you're hoping will have better performances offensively are starting to turn the corner. And like I said, it's all about, for the injuries right now, offensively, it centers around Josh Young. Do they go ahead and hold him out for the year? If they do, that's a big sign to me as far as the Rangers kind of hedging their bets. If they don't hold him out and let him back into the lineup, that tells me they're going full bore at least until the trade deadline, and then they'll see where the chips fall. Fourth in this division, the Los Angeles Angels. Ron Washington really coaching this team up over the last couple of weeks. They're 7-3 over their last 10. They're 9 games under 500. Do I think they're going to win the division? Heck no. Do I think they're going to be in contention for a wild card spot in the beginning of, say, September? Sure. Do I think they'll ultimately be there by the end of the season? Absolutely not. This is a year of transition for them. I would not be surprised if they are sellers at the deadline. I think that's what they ultimately should do. Remains to be seen if that's what they ultimately go through with. Oakland A's are going to be a seller at this year's deadline. 26 games under 500. They invested a little bit in free agency, signing a lot of guys to one-year deals. Some of those deals did not work out. They have since jettisoned a few of them off their roster already. But this is a team that could have one of the best arms available on the market in their closer, Mason Miller. We'll see where he goes. I think he will be traded. He's got 5 years left of control, has some injury issues. Part of the reason why I think the Oakland A's would be wise to go ahead and move him and see what assets they can get back. The ask is said to be absolutely astronomical. 2 top 100 guys and a major league player. Do I think they'll get that asking price met? I do not. I think they still have a good chance to get 2 top 100 guys, but I don't think you're getting much more than that. Mason Miller is a great closer right now. He is controllable, very cost effective, all those kinds of things, but he's still relatively unproven year in and year out. So while you still have a lot of control left on that deal, it's that's the part of the attraction for him. He's also had ups and downs in his success. This year he's been great, but you also wonder when he gets into the postseason, what's he going to look like for the first time? So a lot of question marks around his availability and what the package will be for him. But that's kind of where things stand in the AL West. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. We are on X at Upside SN. You can subscribe to us here on YouTube, Upside Sports Network. Follow us on Facebook, Upside Sports Network as well. Sarah, you take Eovaldi or Scherzer on the Cards. I would absolutely agree with that one. I think both of those guys would look great in a Cardinals uniform, Scherzer especially. Eovaldi, though, I think probably ends up going to one of the coasts. I would probably say the Dodgers ultimately get him at the deadline if the Rangers do sell. Scherzer, I think that experiment has already gone through what it's going to go through anyway with the Dodgers, so I think he would be more available for a team like the Cardinals if the Rangers kind of held back some money for them. Looking at the NL East, possibly the best team in all of baseball, the Philadelphia Phillies, probably the best rotation, at least by performance so far this season. They are currently, 26 games above 500. Braves are without Ronald Acuna once again for the rest of the year. Mets have had a nice resurgence over the last 3 weeks or so. Nationals are going to be a seller, as well as the Marlins. But the Phillies, my goodness, they look good this year. The only hole that they really have is, once again, in center field. They've tried patching it up in the past at the trade deadline, and it hasn't worked. There has been some connections between the Chicago White Sox and the Philadelphia Phillies concerning Luis Robert. Other center fielders, have been connected to the Phillies as well, but this is a team that's ready to win. I would expect them to add a piece at the deadline to help out that bullpen. Bryce Harper at first base, probably the best offensive first baseman of the game, still pretty good with the glove because he does have some athleticism coming from the outfield as well. He's still learning the nuances over there. He's still not exactly the most clean, technically sound first baseman in the game, but he certainly is able to handle the position quite well. The Atlanta Braves, as I mentioned, Ronald Acuna out. Chris Sale looks back to being the old Chris Sale. They already have a number of injuries on that starting staff. They are one more injury away, honestly, in that starting staff from being a team that might not make the wild card right now. They are paper thin as far as their depth. I would expect them to trade for some more pieces like they did in their World Series championship year when Ronald Acuna was out. They added 3 outfielders at the deadline for relatively nothing. I would expect them to go ahead and do something similar to replace Acuna in that lineup. Kelenic has taken over as the leadoff hitter, I believe, in that role for Acuna, and they've been able to tread water. They need to add a starter at the deadline as well. They don't have a ton of trade assets to work with. This core is pretty much all locked up. They don't really have too much depth in the minors either to really trade. So I'm curious to see what they ultimately do. If they decide to take on, say, a big money contract from another team, maybe they don't have to give up the prospects that, say, other teams would have to for a better quality player coming or for a better quality player on a cheaper deal. Looking at the Mets, they have a number of pieces that they could move at the deadline. I think that's probably the route they wanted to go coming into the year. But they've done a nice job of kind of treading water, getting back to 500. Pete Alonso, of course, is in the final year of his deal. Francisco Lindor is the heartbeat of that team. He looks good. But again, they have a lot of good young pieces, Alvarez, Vientos, etc. But I think trading some of their expiring deals would be a wise move for them. I think the Mets fan base would easily turn on them, which might be the reason why they ultimately just stand pat and not trade anybody and just say, hey, we'll try to run it back next year and invest in free agency and go for it next year and keep Pete Alonso. Washington Nationals, 5 games under 500. Their core is really coming along. They have a couple of pieces they could trade here at the deadline, of course, but C.J. Abrams, Mackenzie Gore, Josiah Gray, the whole group there is just kind of coming along. James Wood made his debut today, got a hit. He looks very good as well. This is a team that's going to be in contention for the NL East crown as soon as possibly next year, depending on how those pieces continue to develop and how they spend in free agency. They have the worst contract in baseball still on their roster in Patrick Corbin. Probably the worst starter over the past 3 years since he signed that free agent deal. ERA over 7, I believe. Any other starter would have been cut by now, but because he's got so much money left on that deal, I guess they were hoping he would, figure it out. He just has not been able to do so. Marlins are 24 games under 500. They already signaled they were going to sell, and they already have started jettisoning some pieces. They're without their top 2 starters for the entirety of this season. They traded away Luis Arias, their best position player. they are open for business. If you need a back-end starter, if you need a bullpen arm, if you need a Jake Berger, they are willing to discuss any and all pieces on this roster, and they are wise to do so. This is not a good team as currently constructed. This was a team that kind of overperformed, I believe, over the last couple of years, but they do have some really good starting pitchers coming off of injury next season, and maybe if they can get this thing focused around pitching, get a couple of hitters in there, they could really have something. But we've seen this song and dance from the Mariners before, or excuse me, from the Marlins before, and that's just not how they do business. They're not going to invest at the top of the market for any free agent, and that's really going to hurt them as they try to go to the next level once some of these other teams in the division start to take a step back, like the Braves, the Phillies, etc. Now we go to the NL Central. Everybody had the Milwaukee Brewers on their bingo card as the division crown winners at the midway mark, right? I don't think anybody had that one. They had a lot of good young talent on this roster. Christian Yelich has been back to being almost his old self. The power numbers still aren't quite there, but he certainly looks good. The young pitching staff, you don't really know what you're gonna get from night to night out of the staff, but that young position player group has certainly been way better than I think even they thought they were going to be. They still could get even better performances out of a couple of those guys. I would be interested if I were them in a low-cost starting pitcher, somebody who could come in and give you guaranteed innings. For instance, we just talked about the Rangers. If they just decide to sell at the deadline a piece that could help them out, that's not going to cost them a whole lot, might be a guy like John Gray or an Andrew Heaney, players like that, or a Dane Dunning, maybe somebody with a little bit of control, might help them out and give the Rangers a little bit of something going forward, while the Brewers get something to help them in their rotation this year to seal up that NL Central crown. Cardinals, 3 games above 500, only 6.5 back. This is going to be right down to the wire, I believe, between the Cardinals and the Brewers at the top of this division. Cubs just haven't been able to get out of their own way this year. Pirates, they're playing above their heads right now with Paul Skeens. They're going to have to cut his innings back. This team is going to end up selling a couple of pieces, I believe, at the deadline. Reds were expected to be one of the contenders for this division crown coming into the year. They just have not been able to get them to get things straightened out as far as their pitching and hitting on the same page at the same time. They fix their hitting, then their pitching disappears. Their pitching comes back and their hitting disappears. That's just been kind of the story of the season for the Reds. But looking back at that Brew Crew, I think they're one starter away from really, taking a little bit of an advantage over any one of these other teams in the NL Central. For the Cardinals, I think they could use another starter. I'm right there with you, Sarah. I think they do need to add some more starting pitching. It seems to be the refrain for the last couple of years now that they need to bring in starters. They need to bring in starters. And Sonny Gray is in that rotation. They did invest heavily in bringing in Gibson and Lynn to give you some veteran presence. It just hasn't been quite enough. So I would like to see them bringing in at least one starter here at the deadline. I think they shouldn't sell for sure. I think they should be right there with the Brewers as far as the division winner by the end of the season. If I had to handicap it right now, I'd still say the Brewers hold on, even with their young position players who have never been in a pennant chase. They may wear down as the season goes. The Cardinals could get stronger because they have those veterans that know how to win once you're in a pennant race. That could be the way things ultimately unfold. But I just think that the Brewers are going to be able to hold on. Murphy is probably worthy of the NL Coach of the Year right now, Manager of the Year. I would not be surprised if he gets that one. We talked about the Pirates. They invested in free agency, a lot of one-year type of contracts. I would not be surprised if they moved off the deal of Bednar as well, tried to capitalize on what's left of his value, has seen his value drop a little bit because he doesn't have quite as much term left on his deal. And I would be, if I'm the Pirates, I want to make the most out of Paul Skeens' career. I want to capitalize while his value is low, as far as that contract value is low, and try to make a serious run at things as far as the division next year. And the year after that, I want to make sure I win this division. This is a wide open division with the Reds being as young as they are and the Brewers being as young as they are. There's some real opportunity here for the Pirates to establish their claim ahead of this NL Central division. Looking at the Cincinnati Reds, their position player group, like I mentioned, has all the whiz bangers you could possibly hope for in this lineup. The question is, was the pitching going to be able to hold up? Was the hitting going to be able to continue to stay with it? So far, we've seen up and down performances by both, and that's why you find yourself 6 games under 500, 11 back in the division. I'm not saying they're out of the race for the division yet. I am saying that they're more than likely going to be out of it by September 1. Are they still a wild card contending team? I think they are in the hunt. They're 4.5 games back right now of the wild card. Add a starter here or there, get some consistent performances on both sides, pitching and offense, and you might have something. But I think that's a little bit of a tall task for such a young group. I would not be surprised if we see a managerial change there. Looking at the Chicago Cubs, Craig Counsell was the big investment there. They thought he would be the guy to push them over the top. They made some investments in free agency, and ultimately it just hasn't worked. Everybody thought the Cubs would run away with this division at the beginning of the year, and they're in the cellar. They're 7 games under 500, 11.5 back of the division, 5 back of the wild card. They are not 1 or 2 pieces away. They are 1 or 2 pieces underperforming to get better, to make them at least in contention for the wild card, and then adding a couple more pieces beyond that. I just don't like the makeup of this team outside of Dansby Swanson. Leaves a lot to be desired on the corner infield spots, as well as that starting rotation. I think there's more work to be done in both of those areas. Now out to the AL West, another team that has a claim to be the best team in the entire league, and that's the LA Dodgers. Dodgers are 19 games above 500, with Ohtani being limited, being offense only right now. Yamamoto's been good for them. Kershaw's, I can't remember if he's back or due back soon. But this is a team that's very likely going to win this division. They're 7.5 games up right now on second place San Diego Padres, 10.5 up on the D-backs. And just looking at the way this division is sizing up right now, I think the Dodgers basically run away with this division and hide with a 15-game lead by the end of the year. For the Padres, they went out there and made their big acquisition in bringing in Luis Arraez. They saved some money by dealing Juan Soto. They've certainly shored up their rotation anyway, bringing in Dylan Cease, Michael King for that rotation. They have Darvish locked up and Musgrove. This rotation looks pretty solid, barring some underperforming years, of course. The offense, we knew it's going to take a little bit of a step back without having Juan Soto. That offense did not perform very well last year as well either, even with Juan Soto in there. Having a more contact-oriented hitter there in Luis Arraez, I believe, is helping them to stay above 500. Right now, they're 4 games above 500. Do I think they win a wild card spot? Right now, I would have to lean towards yes. That rotation looks very good when healthy. That lineup should be proficient enough to be able to score enough runs and be able to hold on to one of those final wild card spots. Diamondbacks, World Series contender last year, made it all the way against the Texas Rangers and then lost in 5 games. They got the World Series champion starter anyway in Jordan Montgomery. He has been absolutely abysmal for them. Just has not looked good. I would not be surprised if they found a trade partner. The Texas Rangers really wanted to have him back. If the Diamondbacks eat most of the money that's left on this year of this contract anyway, I think there's a legitimate case that Texas brings him back. He did have a vesting option for next year. For a $20 to $25 million option anyway. Diamondbacks, if they're getting this performance, aren't going to want to pay that. And they tried to bring him in and really capitalize on this youth movement that they've got right there and try to capitalize on this window of contention, or so they thought. Their starting pitching outside of Montgomery has been pretty good, even with the injury issues that they've had. Their offense has performed a little bit better. Christian Walker's really elevated this year. Corbin Carroll really hasn't been very good either, though. And this team could get better offensively. But if I'm them, I look for a way to offload that Montgomery deal. Maybe just a change of scenery, getting back into the clubhouse with the Rangers might straighten him out. Montgomery, I believe, is still a high-quality starter. I believe he's probably a top 50 starter in the game when healthy and when he has a full offseason to prepare. This year, he did not. I don't care what Scott Boras and his agency will tell you as far as, oh, yeah, they were ready, they were training, they had their work, their arm was already loosened and stretched out anyway at the Boras facility, etc. I'm not buying that for a second. We've seen multiple guys now struggle after being held out until at the very end of spring training or into the season. So I would be curious to see who else would be in the market for a guy like Jordan Montgomery. But for the Diamondbacks, are they a buyer? Are they a seller at the deadline? I think they'll do a little bit of both. I think they'll try to offload Jordan Montgomery, and I think they'll try to add one more bullpen arm. Their bullpen hasn't been quite as good as it was last year. Looking at the San Francisco Giants, they find themselves 3 games under 500. I believe they're playing a little bit above their heads. They're having a great year from Helio Ramos. He deserves an all-star nod. I did not vote for him, though, as a starter, but I think he should be a reserve. Now, the Giants, they're very reliant on a couple of starters in their rotation. We knew that coming into the year. They really don't have anybody in the middle of that order that you can point to and say, hey, I'm worried about him in that lineup. This offseason, though, is where they could make the difference going after a guy like Juan Soto. I think he'd be a great fit in that lineup coming into next year. As far as do they buy or sell at the deadline, if I'm the Giants, I probably either hold, which is what they probably will ultimately do, or sell at the deadline. I think Farhan Zaidi needs to be removed as GM of that team. As he just hasn't been able to get those big long-term deals with superstars done. They missed the boat really on Manny Machado and Bryce Harper a few years ago. They had a real chance to get either one, if not both of those guys a few years ago, and didn't get the deal done. Would the Giants look a lot different if they had one or both of those guys. Last in this division, another team that's a clear seller. They are, 27 games under 500 right now. 23 games back of the division, 15 back of a wild card. They have a good catcher there in Diaz that they could move at the deadline. He would fetch them a pretty penny. They have a couple of other guys like Ryan McMahon, if they decide to make him available, that should be able to move to at least move the needle for them to make a trade. The Yankees are said to be one of the teams in there for Ryan McMahon. I would expect that one to go all the way up to the deadline if they decide to move him, but he certainly would be the impact bat the Yankees would need at the corner. They need an improvement at the third base and first base spots. So that's kind of how I see things right now at the midway mark here, division by division. Really appreciate you guys joining us here on a Monday evening at almost 9 o'clock Central, 10 o'clock on the East Coast. West Coast, you're 6:55 out there right now, so a lot of you guys getting home, relaxing, unwinding after a long day at work. Appreciate you taking time with us here at the Upside Sports Network. Make sure you drop us a follow on Twitter at UpsideSN. Subscribe to us here on YouTube, Upside Sports Network. Follow us over on Facebook, Upside Sports Network as well. Now, as I mentioned off the top of the video, that we did have some big-time life-altering changes happening here at the Upside. We've had some big-time changes, so we'll get into those for you real quick before we go into, some deadline names to keep aware of. Alrighty, so as far as what's been happening to us here at the Upside, a lot of you guys know that I posted on about a month ago that we had some family illnesses, passing in the family as well. Don't want to rehash those, but that's kind of what kept us away at the beginning of the baseball season. We were getting all fired up, starting to do some lives again. We had a great live with you guys about a month ago to the day. I think June 2nd. Was when we had our last live. We told you guys we'd be back on the 3rd. Well, the evening of the 3rd, as I was getting ready to do a live with you guys, literally I just turned on my lights and everything. A storm had started here down in Texas and took out a huge pine tree across the street. Luckily, it landed not on top of me, but it did land straight at my driveway, on top of the truck, to where all the electrical off the side of the house, gutter, all that kind of stuff. The meter was hanging on its side. Some damage to the roof. But luckily, we didn't have any significant other damage to the house. There wasn't any water damage coming in or anything like that. But we had no power, so we couldn't actually turn on the lights to do our live that night. I went ahead and called the electric company and had them out here the next day to go ahead and take a look at things. There are so many trees down in the area, and power lines down, telephone pole literally in front of my house was down as well. They had the phone pole up the next day, but they literally cut all the lines to my house to where the electrician had to come out. Well, the electrician took one look and said, no, we are nowhere close to getting back to normal. You're going to have to file a claim with your insurance. Turned out to be several thousands of dollars worth of electrical damage. Took out all of my electrical panels. Damaged some of the equipment in the house as well. Luckily, the setup that I have here, computer and everything, was not damaged by the storm, so that was one of the few thankful things. But unfortunately for us, it took 3.5 weeks to get electricity once again. So we literally just got electricity back Wednesday evening last week, so it's 3.5 weeks since that storm happened. When we finally got all the electric stuff done, Truck ended up being totaled out. It's still got 1.5 million dents. I decided to keep it since it still ran. But it's a little worse for wear, but still able to move around. If you guys want to check out the story, you can follow us over on our Twitter at UpsideSN. You can see the link to the story there if you guys are interested in seeing all the details and updates. We are posting updates there as well. I'm going to try to keep this channel primarily about sports, but I know you guys were sending me messages through Twitter, through our private comments on here, and sending me messages through the Facebook Messenger, all those kinds of things, asking for updates, what was going on. So that's kind of what's been happening behind the scenes. And we had a lot of things happening anyway over the last 6 months, and we're excited to finally get back to normal. It's probably going to be another month until we're completely there. Still have some other things we're going to have to take care of in the month of July, but we are going to be here for you guys for the trade deadline. As I mentioned, MLB Hot Stove Daily will be back 5 days a week, sometimes 6 or more if there's events happening on the weekend, if we see some big-time trades, etc. We'll check into the news of the day as well here shortly as well, and kind of keep you guys up to date on what's happening, rumors that are happening, who ultimately signs. Trevor Bauer, of course, is still out there. He looks very good, by the way. If you guys follow him on TikTok at all, he looks like a true number 2 or 3 starter right now. I'm not going to say a 1 just because he's not facing major league hitters, but he looks like a guy who could make a difference in a pennant chase. Off-field concerns are what they are. He was proven, or at least was proven to be extorted anyway by the people that were alleging things about him. I won't go into more detail about that. You guys can look that up if you want. But that's kind of where things stand with Trevor Bauer as far as the signing front. As far as trades, some of the bigger impact trades we mentioned already, Mason Miller, keep your eyes peeled for, Luis Robert as well. But that's going to be what we're going to be doing here for the MLB Hot Stove Daily. Make sure you guys subscribe, and we'll be live for you guys probably around 9 o'clock, right around now during the week. I'm off today and tomorrow. We'll be out of town on Wednesday, but we'll be back with it on probably Thursday, Friday, and might even do a Saturday video for you guys as well. In addition to doing our daily videos, on the days where we don't do a daily, we're going to try to do a live baseball game or 2. On days where I don't work, I'm going to try to do one around the noon hour on Wednesday, maybe the 3 o'clock hour, depending on which of the games is best, and then one in the evening as well. So we're going to really crank things up. Our MLB coverage is certainly going to go up. We're going to cover quite a bit of the NBA offseason until those deals are signed. We did a video earlier today, Klay Thompson going to Dallas. They actually beat out the Lakers for a premium free agent. 3-team trade is looking like it is done. A couple of second-round picks going to Golden State. Josh Green to the Charlotte Hornets. Klay Thompson forming a new quote-unquote big 3, if you will, with the Dallas Mavericks. At this point, I'm not sure Klay still qualifies as a big 3, but he's certainly an upgrade over Tim Hardaway Jr., which is literally the contract they essentially signed him to in that sign-and-trade deal. So that happened today. A lot of hockey news today. We'll probably post a couple of videos about it. I know my American audience likes to focus quite a bit on Major League Baseball, but quite a bit happened in the world of hockey today. We'll post some of those videos and get back to our short content as well. You'll probably get 3 videos a day in the form of shorts. We'll try to crank up the volume of those. We'll probably start with 1 this week, 2 next week, 3 the following every single weekday. So make sure you follow us as well for those. Keep you guys updated, and appreciate you guys joining us here at the Upside. All right, as I mentioned, we wanted to get into some of the latest headlines from around Major League Baseball. We had a couple of big passings recently. Willie Mays passed. Orlando Cepeda also passed away recently. Want to give condolences to those of you who felt that loss personally. I know a lot of us around the nation felt that one from just them being great human beings, an ambassador for the sport, groundbreakers for their sports as well. And those certainly were difficult for Major League Baseball. We mentioned the one call-up today was James Wood. He got a knock in his first Major League start. The Rays sound like they're going to have multiple starters on the market. We talked a little bit about the Rangers having a bevy of starters that they could deal at the deadline if they went that route. Well, there is some rumors about Fairbanks being available from the Rays along with a number of other starters. There was some thought that if the Rays were out of it, that Randy Arozarena could be moved. There was some connections between the Cardinals and Randy Arozarena this offseason. He has not performed very well. There is not going to be a trade for Randy Arozarena, at least in my estimation, between the Cardinals and the Rays. Bad news for the world-beating Philadelphia Phillies is that Harper and Schwarber are now both on the injury list. Both, I believe, hamstring-type issues. I could be wrong on Schwarber. I know Harper is anyway. The Guardians did sign one guy to a major league deal, Matthew Boyd, recently anyway. And then you have Dallas Keuchel was recently traded. He was in the minors for the Mariners. Wasn't really going to make the major league roster there based on how good those starters had been. He immediately got the start for the Milwaukee Brewers and actually beat the Texas Rangers that day. So that's kind of where things stand right now. We have the Edwin Diaz suspension anyway, 10 games for a foreign substance on his hand. We've had, 3 pitchers, I believe, for the Mets go through that issue now since the ban was instituted. And something to kind of keep your eye on. Maybe something's going on there. More than just a little spit and rosin or sweat and rosin. At least that's what the umpires are claiming. One bit of news out of the Rangers that the backup catcher, third string catcher, if you will, fourth string catcher in the view of the Rangers anyway, Knapp for them was hitting the ball very well at AAA Round Rock. He very well could get a big league contract somewhere right now. He's been that good offensively in the minors at Round Rock. And there's a lot of teams out there that could use a little bit of an offensive punch at that backup catcher spot. I would not be surprised if he easily finds his way onto a major league roster. Tony Kemp was released from his minor league deal with the Twins anyway. And that's kind of your news at the moment. Alrighty, let's check in on a few of the injuries. I pulled this one up a little bit ago anyway. There we go. We'll look at the Arizona Diamondbacks. We'll kind of go through this alphabetically. You look at Merrill Kelly. He is expected back in a month and a half or so on the 60-day IL. As I mentioned, they had a number of starters on the injured list, but they've had a number of guys step up. A couple of their guys that were expected to be big-time starters for them, Kelly and Eduardo Rodriguez, has found their way onto the 60-day IL. Both of those guys should be back for the pennant run. That's why I mentioned that Jordan Montgomery might be the odd guy out in that rotation, because he has been absolutely abysmal, especially over the last month or so. So keep your eyes peeled for a trade there. Going on to the Atlanta Braves, we mentioned already about the Acuna injury. Spencer Strider is out as well. He is expected back next year. They have so many injuries right now that they are still treading water, but they are very thin as far as their depth. A couple of guys that are expected to be back soon. Michael Harris is supposed to be back here in about 10 days or so. I wouldn't be surprised if he was one of the pieces that the Braves look to for more offense, if you will, with the Acuna injury down the stretch. I don't think they want to spend big in the trade market at the deadline for a hitter. I do think they want to go after a starting pitcher, though, to replace Strider. And also give them insurance in case Sale really hits a wall once again. Looking at the Baltimore Orioles, really would look for starting pitching, honestly. Bradish and Wells, Means, all having big-time injuries for them. They need a starter. They brought in Corbin Burns, great acquisition for them. But I would like to see them add one more starter. I thought they would have been a great team for Dylan Cease this offseason. Ultimately, the Padres get that one done. Maybe they're one of the teams that could capitalize on the Rays deciding to go ahead and toss their chips to the center and say, the heck with this season, we'll move on to the next. They could be a team that acquires one of those starters. Red Sox, Liam Hendriks, been out for a significant period of time now. He did throw a bullpen, but he is not eligible until September 1. We're probably looking at him. He might even come back before September 1, actually, based on him throwing a bullpen. But as far as Liam Hendriks is concerned, maybe he would be some insurance for a team that wants to add a reliever, even though you're not going to see him pitch probably before the deadline. Casas was on the 60-day IL, but it looks like he could be coming back soon. Lucas Giolito, tough luck injury for him to start the year. You know, more injury issues there. Garrett Whitlock, injury issue. Trevor Story, another injury issue for them. And for them to be 5 games over is absolutely outstanding. There was some rumors about a month ago or so that said that Alex Cora might ultimately move on from the Red Sox job and take over as the Yankees skipper. I'd be shocked if that happened. There is some belief within the industry that Aaron Boone, while a great manager, might be on thin ice if things don't work out this year for them based off of the acquisition of Soto and how good their starting rotation has been. That it could be World Series or bust, or at least ALCS or bust for him. I don't buy it, but there are some rumblings out there that the Yankees could be looking for a change in voice at that top spot in that dugout. And Alex Cora has been one of the names that's been floated as a replacement, potential replacement anyway, for Aaron Boone. Chicago Cubs, again, underperformance, etc., etc., etc. They don't really have too many major injuries as far as to their big-time pieces anyway. Couple of 60-day injuries, etc., but nothing that's really holding them back at the moment. White Sox, you'd like to see Mike Clevenger catch a little bit of heat as you get closer to the deadline. Maybe you could flip him for somebody. Outside of that, really nothing to really look at here. Corey Knebel could be a nice piece out of the bullpen for somebody. Has some closing experience, another guy who could come back from injury. But for them, it's all about talent acquisition, trying to add some pieces around the deadline that make sense for their future, jettisoning some of those one-year deals that they have left, getting rid of some of their aging veterans as well. Looking at the Reds, Stevenson should be back soon. He's on bereavement at the moment. Pagan, reliever, should be back in a month or so. Strand is out for the year. He was underperforming this year, though. Lodolo is expected back in a week or so. Matt McClain is looking like he could be back, according to David Bell, the manager there. And Edwin Arroyo just had surgery a couple months ago. He's going to be out till next year. So that's kind of your standpoint right now. The injuries are what they are. They still have a ton of young talent from a position player side. They could add some small pieces here or there to shore up first base since Strand is out. But primarily it's about getting consistency in that offense and consistency in that rotation, consistency out of that bullpen, and then they'll be able to move forward. But right now they're a young team, and they're going through what young teams usually struggle with, consistency. Guardians, they're playing above their head, but we'll see if they're able to stay as productive as they have been early this year. Shane Bieber is out, of course. I thought they should have traded him before the season. Now he's got Tommy John. He'll be back next year. Trevor Stefan was another reliever. Tommy John, or UCL repair anyway. Not too many injuries to report anyway for the Guardians, but they are playing way above their heads. They're not going to, push their chips to the center for, a big time bat. They might do a small addition here or there, but they're not going to sell the farm for any one hitter. For the Rockies, the one piece that they could have moved was Herman Marquez. He was on the 60-day AL because he had the injury last year. They're looking for him to make one more rehab start before coming back. But if your team looking to bring him in, along with, say, Sensatella, both of those guys are not really going to be difference makers for you down the stretch because they won't have enough innings or consistency enough anyway to be able to make a difference here at the deadline. Good news for them anyway is Zach Veen is supposed to be back here soon. So that's kind of where the Rockies stand right now. Tigers, Javi Baez is on the IL. I think that's actually a good thing for them. They can actually get a little bit better. But looking at the rest of this injuries, a couple of their young prospects that they're hoping to get some some more performance out of. Jace Young, the younger brother anyway to Josh Young, Casey Mize as well. Matt Vierling is a guy they had some hopes for. They need to get those guys in the lineup and see if they can make a little bit of a push to get back into that wild card picture. Do I think they'll get there? No, but those are some pieces that are the future of the Tigers that they need to get back in there and just see what they really got going forward. If they're guys that can be a part of the next great Tigers team, or if they can be moved off of those guys at the deadline or this offseason. Astros, we've mentioned a few times about the multiple injuries to their starters that they've had. Verlander once again finds himself on the injured list right now. Luis Garcia is out for uh, uh, is on the 60-day IL. He's supposed to be coming back around the 26th. Kyle Tucker is on the injured list right now. Graveman is out until at least September. McCullers is missing significant time again. Urquidy, Javier are all out. They're going to be back, I believe, probably next year. When you look at the 2024 Houston Astros team, it's all about injuries. I just don't think they have enough to win a World Series. They are playing much better baseball as of late, but I just don't think they're going to have enough to be able to get the job done. Looking at the Kansas City Royals, Adam Frazier's due back here in a couple of days. Kyle Wright next year. But outside of that, they've been relatively healthy. They're supposed to be getting Bubic back here in the next couple of days. He might be going to the bullpen, it sounds like. Maybe take a little stress off of his arm. Plus, they have a number of starters they brought in this offseason that have really made a difference. Cole Ragans has taken a real step forward in the last year with them as well since being acquired for Aroldis Chapman. Looking at the Angels, they're again a team in rebuild mode, or at least retooling mode. Mike Trout is out until at least the end of July. Drury's coming back, or is at least having up and down performances. Injuries have affected him a little bit here and there as well. Same thing with Ward. Sandoval is on the 60-day IL. He just underwent surgery. He'll probably be back next year. Rendon is on the 60-day IL. He's supposed to be coming back here soon, but that contract is immovable. For the Angels, they're just hoping to get some consistent performances out of their young guys and see if they can really have a nice growth year for those guys like Shanuel, Neto, pieces like that. Looking at the Dodgers, Kershaw's due back in a couple of weeks. Muncy also in a couple of weeks. Buehler should be coming back here shortly. Mookie Betts is out right now, supposed to be back around the end of the month. But even with that said, there's still 20-plus games over 500. They look fantastic. Yamamoto's found his way onto the IL. He should be back here in a couple of weeks. They've got a number of young guys on that IL as well. So while they have a ton of injuries, they've still been able to maintain a high level of play. And Dodgers just continuing to roll. We mentioned the injuries to the Marlins, not really going to get into too many of these, but almost all of them are to their pitching staff. Sanchez, Cabrera, Weathers, Luzardo, Garrett, all on the injured list right now. And that doesn't even mention Sandy Alcantara, their number 1, and Yuri Perez, their number 2. Those guys are the heartbeat of that rotation. They need those guys to be in there to be even close to competitive, let alone a contending team. They're a long way from both. For the Brewers, they're a young team, as I mentioned. They're hoping to get Devin Williams back here in the next couple of weeks. He could be a guy that is a difference maker for them, a trade deadline acquisition, if you will, for the Brewers as they try to maintain their NL Central lead. Gary Sanchez is looking like he could be coming back here in the next couple of days anyway. And D.L. Hall could be a nice pitching acquisition for them. Remember, he came over in the deal for Corbin Burns. He could be a nice addition for them, give them some innings out of a rotation that really has struggled to find consistency out of anybody in that rotation. So we'll see what they get. For the Twins, as I mentioned, they got rid of quite a few of their rotation arms. They're hoping Paddock could soak up some of those. He's been decent for them, but he's again on the injured list. Once again, he's been injured a number of times in his career. Kirilov hit the IL. He didn't know he was actually playing injured, or at least he knew he was playing injured, but didn't report it to team officials. Got him in a little bit of hot water with the team, but seems like they've at least ironed things out there. Looking at the Mets, Kodai Senga is on the 60-day IL. He's looking like he'll be back in a few weeks. Nimmo, day-to-day. Marte is on the 10-day IL. He'll probably be another few weeks away. But again, they're a team that I don't expect to push their chips in to make an acquisition at the deadline. Instead, I'd expect them to try to sell some pieces at the deadline or stand pat. Looking at the Yankees, I expect them to go all in at this trade deadline. I mean, this is the 1 year you have Juan Soto under contract. Now, of course, you're hoping to sign him to a long-term deal, but it doesn't sound like at least ownership thinks that that's a good idea. I'm sure Brian Cashman would love to be able to retain both Judge and Soto, but it just sounds like they ultimately might have to lose Soto for nothing this offseason if they're unable to get a long-term deal done during the year. Soto's not going to sign an extension during the year, so we'll see what happens. He's having a great year in New York. He does love New York, so maybe there's a discount in there somewhere that the Yankees might be able to convince him to stay. But looking at their injury situation right now, Giancarlo Stanton is on the 10-day IL. He's a couple of weeks away, though. Clark Schmidt on the 60-day. He's probably a month away at this point. Rizzo hit the 60-day IL. He'll be back towards the end of August, the beginning of September. My guess is when rosters expand in September, we should see him back at that point. And Loaisiga is out for the year. They do have issues, though, at first base and third base. They could use some depth in that starting rotation. They could use some more bullpen arms. That's where things stand with the Yankees as we get closer to the deadline. They will certainly be a buyer. Oakland A's on the other end of the spectrum will be a seller. Ruiz, one of their big pieces that they acquired in trade anyway, has not really lived up to the hype, has been demoted to the minors at times as well. Some of their offseason acquisitions, Alex Wood, Ross Stripling, Kyle Muller, all find their way to the injured list right now. And it's just tough seeing anybody besides Miller bringing back a decent return for the A's and maybe some of their other bullpen pieces. But not a whole lot to look at here on this roster as far as trade deadline acquisitions. Maybe a guy like Alex Wood, but he hasn't performed well when he is healthy, and he's out until after the All-Star break and after the trade deadline as it is. He's not getting moved. Maybe Ross Stripling comes back and has a decent performance or two. We've seen guys come back, have terrible years before the injury, go on the injury list, come back, have one decent start, and then get dealt for somebody's number 20 prospect. We saw that with the Rangers and Farrell a few years back. I say a few years. It's probably been 10 years now at this point since that trade was done. Guy came back, literally pitched 5 innings, pitched decent, wasn't great, but pitched decent, and they were still able to net a decent decent prospect out of that move. Looking at the Philadelphia Phillies, we talked earlier about the injury to Harper and Schwarber, but on this injury list as well, Taijuan Walker. All of these are short-term injuries. I do not expect them to be out for significant periods of time, but those are the injuries right now. JT Realmuto is also on the injured list. So they're playing a little bit of a limping brand of baseball, if you will, and they just need to get healthy, maybe add a bullpen piece, and it's said, like I said earlier, Dave Dombrowski is not likely to sit on his hands at the trade deadline. He wants to make an acquisition. I would not be surprised if they added some depth to this rotation, some depth to that bullpen, and maybe a center fielder. Pittsburgh Pirates on the injured list. Once again, David Bednar, probably their top trade asset that they could have at the deadline. He's due back here in a week. Hopefully he can stay healthy as they get close to the deadline. Henry Davis, a guy they were really hoping to have a nice, leap as far as an offensive piece for them, really hasn't found that consistency as of yet. Former first-round pick, former number 1 pick, I believe, and it just hasn't worked out. Now, Paul Skeens looks every bit the ace that they were hoping he would be. He looks like the next Jacob deGrom to me at this point. He is that good of a pitcher. But they really need to capitalize on this window that they have with him on their roster. This is not a title contending team this year. But if you trade some of those one-year deals that you signed this offseason, Aroldis Chapman, etc., maybe you can turn some of those assets into pieces that could be a part of that next great Pirates team. Moving on to the Padres, Yu Darvish is on the injured list, due back in towards the end of the week anyway. Joe Musgrove looks like he'll be coming back, and said he'll play catch Monday. That was 3 days ago? I would expect him to be more around the trade deadline or a little bit later. Xander Bogaerts is missing some time. Fernando Tatis is missing some time. Patino, Capusano. That's a tough injured list for the Padres, but they're still finding themselves in second place in the NL West. So good on them for treading water. And Jurickson Profar certainly has elevated his game this year with them as well. Giants, Alex Cobb is on the injured list. Kyle Harrison, a guy they have a lot of high hopes for, is on the injured list. Snell has not performed well. Another one of Boris's guys who signed late that ultimately did not work. Wilmer Flores, who's been fantastic for the Giants at times, hits as their cleanup hitter occasionally. He's hit the injured list, due back in a week. Robbie Ray is still on the injured list, and looking like he's due back here in a couple of weeks. So that could be a nice get for them, but I'm not expecting them to, ultimately win the division or even contend for a wild card spot. Their big offseason acquisition, Young Ho Lee, is on the injured list because Tommy John. He'll be back next year. So that's kind of where things stand with the Giants. Mariners, as I said, they made the acquisition of Mitch Garver. Right now, he's had some difficulty staying healthy. Wu has been injured as well a little bit. Their bullpen has had some up and down performances, though, if they're going to add here at the deadline, which I do believe they will do. They have Jerry DiPoto as their GM. He is going to make a move even if they weren't in contention. But as far as where they could go, I believe they need to add at least a bullpen arm and for sure a middle of the order bat. So however they get it done, I think that would be the best course of action for them. Looking at the St. Louis Cardinals. Sarah, you're looking at your Cardinals. 60-day IL anyway from Steven Matz. He'll coming back towards the end of the month. Sounds like he is on the rehab track right now. Tico Roby, the piece they got back for Jordan Montgomery, is on the injured list at the moment. Sounds like he could be coming back in a couple of weeks. Newt Bar is also injured, but looking like he could be back here in a couple of days, possibly by the end of the week. Not too many significant injuries, but again, just more consistency is what the name of the game for the Cardinals. Consistency, consistency, consistency. Looking at the Tampa Bay Rays. A couple of 60-day IL stints, of course, we already mentioned. McClanahan off the top, he is due back next year. Rasmussen towards the end of the year. McKay towards the end of the year. Looking at Jeffrey Springs, you're probably looking at him as a week away or so. He could be a nice piece for them to add, try to get back into contention, or if they do end up selling at the deadline, if he proves he's healthy over the stretch of games, once he does come back, maybe they end up pivoting off of him as well. Now, we mentioned the Rangers' injuries quite a bit. We talked a lot about their starting pitching, but look at their position player group as well. Corey Seager got hit in the wrist. He's missed some time already this year. Josh Young has basically missed the entire season so far, aside from like 4 games. Then they get to their starting pitching. Tyler Mahle, we knew he was going to be on the injured list to start. He'll be back around the trade deadline. He's already started his rehab assignment. Cole Winn has been good for the Rangers as well. This year anyway. He's kind of stepped up at times anyway, but he is now on the 60-day IL. Cody Bradford started the season as the number 5 starter. Really was their best starter in the month of April. Found his way to the injured list, looking like he's at least a couple of weeks away, maybe more. DeGrom probably going to be towards the middle of the month, maybe the end of the month of August before he is back. He probably won't even be stretched out by the time the end of September rolls around, so maybe the first game of the postseason, if the Rangers get there, will be the first time we see Jacob DeGrom really back to his full strength, as long as things still go according to plan. Josh Sborz looks like he could be back here soon. A good bullpen arm for the Rangers. Closed the World Series out for them. Evan Carter could be back here in a week or so. He has not performed well. I would not be surprised, though, if they leave him in the minors to really get hot first before they bring him back up, because he was not performing well at the major league level before the injury. Kumar Rocker also about to start his rehab assignment as well. Looking at the Toronto Blue Jays, Vlad Guerrero, IKF, Joey Votto, all day today. The bigger injuries for them, what's going to happen with Jordan Romano? He's on the IL right now. He had some injury issues. Looking like his timeline is also going to be pushed back. But this team is more about the performance on the field, that it just hasn't been up to snuff. And hopefully, they can start performing a little bit better and maybe not be in that seller category. I don't think it's going to happen. I think they're stuck with where they're at, and they ultimately have to sell at the deadline. But that's kind of your injury issues, pieces that could be available. It's still a little early, but we already saw the Luis Arraez trade, and hopefully we start to see a couple more as we get further into the month of July. As I mentioned, we'll be live for you guys every single weekday around 9 o'clock to give you guys all the latest MLB Hot Stove Daily. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. And before we wrap up, let's get to one more thing. Now, here at the Upside, like I said, we cover Major League Baseball, the NBA, NHL, and the NFL. Training camps are right around the corner for the NFL. Uh, Basketball just wrapped up their season. Jason Tatum just signed the richest contract of any player in Major League or in NBA history. 5 years, $315 million. Klay Thompson goes from the Golden State Warriors to the Dallas Mavericks. Paul George goes from the Los Angeles Clippers to the Philadelphia 76ers. A lot of things happening in the world of basketball. Hockey, we saw some big names change teams. Guys we thought would never change the sweater. Steven Stamkos has played his entire career up to this point anyway with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Ultimately, they decided to go with Jake Gensel over Steven Stamkos and don't have enough room for both. He ends up signing with Nashville. They actually signed 3 of the top 4 free agents this signing period anyway, spending over 20.5 in average annual value on those 3 players. Just absolutely insane amount of spending by Nashville. The Toronto Maple Leafs did a great job upgrading their blue line anyway. Chris Tanev. They brought back Liljegren. They brought in a couple other defensemen as well. Stars did a nice job piecing their back into their defense corps together, and they got the backup for Jake Ottinger for 3 years at $1 million per. So, good job, cap savings, etc. Lyubushkin was brought in from the Toronto Maple Leafs as well. Some head-scratching contracts anyway for Matt Dumba and Lyubushkin. They went ahead and bought out the contract of Ryan Suter, who was 4 years, 1 year left, and brought in 2 guys valued very similarly on the market anyway, and ultimately, take away from some of their cap space that they could have next year when Jamie Benn's deal comes off, when they're going to have to sign guys like Wyatt Johnston. They still have to sign Thomas Harley as well, but it sounds like it's going to be a bridge deal for him and the Dallas Stars. So like I said, a lot of things happening here with MLB Hot Stove Daily. Like I said, we'll be live for you guys 5 nights a week around 9 o'clock. Make sure you join us then. And when we are not live, we'll be having a game for you guys. So make sure you tune in and join us for those. Appreciate you guys joining us. Like I said, if you guys want to check out the full story on what happened as to why we weren't posting videos for you guys the last few weeks, you guys can check us out on Twitter at UpsideSN and kind of check out our full story over there. Appreciate you guys joining us once again. Like I said, we'll be back for you guys again tomorrow night. Be sure to join us then, and y'all have a great evening.